Again, Lon here with Strategen. I'm going to be going over high-level industry trends and catch up with energy storage. And before I do, just like to give a little bit more background on myself. I got my start at Research Institute at the University of Arizona, dealing with new technologies in the energy sector. So I was working working with solar, obviously in Arizona, but also compressed air energy storage, supercapacitors, lithium ions, and others. I was on the economics and policy side. After that, I jumped into the private sector, and then I found myself in the governor's office as a consumer advocate in Arizona. And there I was a staff lead on procurement topics, IRPs, and the fun topic of net metering, which, as you know, Arizona has had some fun around. So after that, in joining Strategen, I wanted to work for more than just one consumer advocate, and that's what I do at Strategen. I work for PUCs and consumer advocates across the country. So just my next trip will be in New Hampshire just tomorrow, and we'll be working there on DER market reform efforts. So that's sort of the background that I bring to this, and so I've got a little bit of a unique perspective as well, and I'll be going into a case in Arizona that I was a part of. And here's the topics, and again, you might ask, well, why is a consumer advocate talking about energy storage trends? Well, part of the reason is I think it's very important to keep your pulse on where technology is and where it's going. And storage will not work in every situation. It won't pencil in every type of use case. But there are some cases where it does pencil or will pencil very soon. And we should be aware of those cases and make sure that we take advantage of energy storage when it does make sense for all ratepayers. So to kick things off, storage, very broad asset class. Just thinking of a comparison with solar energy, where it's primarily two assets, right? We have the photovoltaics and solar thermal, and you know all the different subcategories. You've got tracking, you've got solar hot water in the home, all the way to large thermal plants in the desert. Well, storage has about 3x the amount of asset classes that solar has, and within each of those classes is a wide array of different technologies. So you've got the electrochemical battery side of things. You've got mechanical, think flywheel. You've got the thermal, ice or hot water, and the bulk gravitational, of course, with pumped hydro. And there's about 200 gigawatts already installed across the world with storage. So it's nothing necessarily new. However, what is new is what some of the different asset classes that are starting to really emerge and be deployed. Because traditionally, it's been that pumped hydro and thermal approach to the deployment of technology around storage. And again, that is starting to change. So with the diversity of technology, it lends itself to being able to be deployed in a diversity of different locations. And really, this is, I think, a great slide to focus our scope today, which is almost all of the above. Storage can fit with, in a residential setting, all the way to bulk transmission setting, co-located with traditional power plants or renewable power plants, distribution system sided. So this is really the scope, which is what we're looking at, the entire grid. So the other thing is, with this diversity of technology, each technology has its own attributes and its own locations and values that it can bring. And traditionally, we've seen sort of three core buckets of perspectives when it comes to technology deployment in the energy sector, and that's more customer-sided. That's one. Utility, this can be distribution and transmission from that perspective, and then a wholesale perspective as well. And there's a lot on here, and you can look at this later, but this attempts to communicate the three different perspectives and some of the values that perspective, when they deploy technology, is looking for. And the thing with storage is it can actually cross many of these different silos. And my colleague Ed will dive more into that later. But it's just worth noting that that diversity in technology that storage can bring can really hit on all the different key perspectives when deploying a technology in the grid. So where are we at today in the U.S.? About 24,000 megawatts deployed. A large portion of that, about 20 gigawatts, is the pumped hydro component. But there's a lot of little projects that are starting to make the dots there. And this is from the energy storage database. And just a few caveats. One, that only covers, it does not cover residential or small commercial, but it does cover the larger, maybe industrial size, and certainly most of the utility scale size of the storage installations across the U.S. Now, of course, with pumped hydro, it's geographic specific. It has to have a large amount of scale. So you're not you won't see a hockey stick approach to pumped hydro out there like you'll see with batteries or other technologies. But again, compared to where we're at with other traditional gen and just the total amount of generation out there, this is a relatively unique situation in a commodity type of market where you do not have that much storage, right? In terms of the total generation out there. So it's relatively unique in the commodity setting not to have that, and we'll get into this later, but it does lead to sometimes underutilized assets out there due to that lack of storage. So I like to sort of break things down a bit in chapters of where we're seeing the storage industry with the 5 asset classes, say, outside of the more traditional pumped hydro. And you can see the first chapter is that demonstrations and pilots chapter where you're learning by doing. It's small, contained projects where you've got some research purposes as well. A lot of states are at this phase with storage today. The next is more of a specific use case deployment. So there's an issue in the grid that is maybe a bit unique, that storage just really fits there. So it could be a local capacity issue, for instance. It could be a distribution line out to a remote location, for instance. And some states are certainly here today. And then that third chapter is more of a traditional deployment type of chapter with wholesale market opportunities, just like traditional generation. There's drivers that are taking us through these chapters, and there's economic and technology drivers. There's also policy drivers. On the economic side, of course, you've got those cost declines that are opening up more and more use cases. On the policy side, you have indirect and direct drivers. So you've got a investment tax credit that can be applied if storage is coupled with solar, for instance. You have renewable energy targets at the state level. You have possibly the clean power plan as well. All sort of pushing the storage along in different ways and manners across the U.S. Another driver, utilities. And this is a great statistic to show that energy storage is on the top of the list in terms of investment priority. And this is really important because that investment helps deliver the scale, and that scale helps that price curve come down. All those things coming together leads to a pretty strong market forecast for energy storage. This is non-hydro, and a good portion of this is the battery classification, that asset class. So you can see that it's really ramping up, and has a pretty strong projection in the next few years. And this is the U.S., but it's not unique. And again, it's what I call the rise of the batteries in terms of a lot of that growth. But you can see compared to other countries as well that this is not necessarily U.S. specific, although the U.S. is a huge market as well. But it is growing everywhere, and with that growth, you see those economies of scale starting to happen, which if you follow the solar industry over the past decade, you've seen similar trends, and this is just a good illustration of cell costs that trajectory of coming down the curve, and then just some capital cost trends with some of the battery technologies. And this next slide is pretty text heavy, so you can take a look at it later. But what I wanted to stress is this right here with lithium ion in particular. Over the next 5 years, it's projected to decline by almost 50% in terms of price. And that's pretty unique in terms of all the asset classes of storage that I touched on earlier. Flow batteries also have a good trajectory downward. So different chemistries, different technologies, and they're all on a different type of price trajectory. The other thing is you've got a lot of smart people, a lot of big companies investing in energy storage technology. Some of them are here in the room with us today. But this is a sign of things that come when large companies are taking the technology seriously and investing in it. And it's across the market sector in a variety of different spaces within the ecosystem. And we can't forget that batteries don't exist, just for grid-connected power. It's also in EVs, and EVs can drive that scale that you need to continue to hit those lower and lower price points for cells. And does anyone recall the Tesla Powerwall sales that Elon Musk said were crazy and saying how many they pre-sold? That was such a big deal. The number? About
325K.
Yeah. So it was initially around 50K, and it went up, and people were like, "Holy cow!" Right? Well, just the 2015 EV hybrids equates to 2.6 million Powerwalls. Right? So this is, and that's about 3% of car sales. So just think about that when it starts scaling up, how that will impact the entire supply chain for cell production. And again, you have sort of two trends happening where you have that increased demand, which leads to that economies of scale, which then lowers the price, which leads to more demand. And again, this is where you start to see that hockey stick approach. There's also coupling between different technologies that will happen. So this is a forecast of solar plus storage. In Hawaii, there's a KIUC project where there was a coupling of solar plus storage for around 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and which for Hawaii is actually really, really good. They have what they call the paradise tax there, so everything is more expensive. But you can see that these technologies are merging, and it's not just it's storage with solar, it's other technologies as well. And with that, you're having utilities in different states start to look at programs and procurements that touch on these technologies, and there's some coupling happening. You'll see this APS one. This is like a smart home pilot where you're mixing DR, solar, batteries all in one, and there's a sprinkling of really innovative programs across the U.S. that are starting to include energy storage along with other technologies. And you also have interest on the wholesale market side of things. How do we get these new technologies and these new couplings to participate in a way that makes sense in the wholesale market setting? And so there's some reforms going on around the country in different ISOs. And each state is unique, so each state approaches storage a little bit differently. The main case that people hear of is California, but there's many others. Oregon also has a procurement target. Hawaii, if you followed the news recently, they just approved a TOU rate that can be very favorable for EV adopters and for solar plus storage adopters. They also have a self-supply tariff in Hawaii that is jump-starting the distributed storage market. New Jersey, Washington, and Arizona, and I was involved in this case, and I still actually work in Arizona for the Consumer Advocate. But this was a procurement policy where APS proposed a peaker, and through a long case, basically, there's a cost-effective carve-out if they deploy a traditional asset where they have to look at storage, as long as it's cost-effective, and install it along with or to replace a traditional peaker. They also just approved a peak demand reduction target and a $4 million residential storage program. So Arizona is doing a lot of interesting things for their own, unique grid. And again, a distribution value in Arizona is going to be completely different than a distribution value in Manhattan, right? So it's different use cases, but Arizona's finding its way to find those as cost-effective use cases. Another state, Massachusetts, this is sort of hot off the press, where the Department of Energy Resources issued a report showing recommending about 600 megawatts of energy storage deployment in ways that will save all ratepayers money over time. And that equates about 5% of their peak load. And they really wanted to focus on this because in Massachusetts, and this is similar to many other states, those top hours where you need resources cost a lot of money for ratepayers. And a lot of times they're idle assets for most of the year except for those few hours where you need them. So Massachusetts really went from off the map, and this is more battery storage, but really down here, and they want to get close to the top there. So it's interesting to see how it'll be interesting to see how they manage and navigate around energy storage in the years to come, and how successful they are in getting to that top spot. So that is about it, quick and dirty, but hopefully that gives us a little bit more background as we try to work on understanding where energy storage fits in Minnesota. So thank you.